I've not really got a view, the referees make their decisions and he's chosen to give him a red card.
Okay, was the big deciding point in the game, though, in terms of the pressure you're able to put on with 10 men towards the end?
We probably put more pressure on with 10 men than we did with 11.
But that being the point, it would have been a lot easier with 11.
Well, we hope so. It wasn't that easy before it, so, it's the referee's decision, he makes them.
I can see you're understandably very disappointed tonight. Does this feel a low?
In football, some careers rise like fairy tales, and others unfold more like Shakespearean dramas, full of ambition, pride, heartbreak, and redemption. David Moyes' story belongs firmly in that second category. It is the story of a man trusted with a kingdom, stripped of it in public, doubted, mocked, written off, and yet somehow still standing. A manager who has experienced the highest respect and the harshest ridicule. Before we dive deep into the emotional rollercoaster of his journey, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you appreciate honest, in-depth football storytelling. Your support helps us continue telling the human stories behind the headlines. Because David Moyes' career is not just about tactics or trophies, it is about resilience under relentless pressure. When Sir Alex Ferguson personally chose Moyes as his successor at Manchester United in 2013, it felt like a royal endorsement. Ferguson was not simply retiring, he was passing down an empire. The most dominant force in English football history was being handed to a man who had never managed a Champions League giant before. Moyes arrived at Old Trafford with dignity, humility and belief. But from the very first months, the weight of expectation pressed down like a storm cloud that never lifted. Every draw felt like a crisis. Every loss felt like betrayal. He inherited champions, but not momentum. The squad was aging. The psychological shadow of Ferguson lingered in every corridor. Moyes was trying to impose his authority in a dressing room still echoing with the voice of the greatest manager of all time. Results began to slip. Confidence eroded. The press sharpened their knives, and then came that infamous image at Goodison Park. A fan dressed as the Grim Reaper, holding a sign that read, "R.I.P. Fergie Era." It was brutal theatre. Moyes wasn't just losing matches, he was losing control of the narrative. 10 months into a 6-year contract, he was dismissed. Just, yeah, like that. The chosen one had become the fallen one. Moyes later admitted that the experience left him destroyed. It was not just a professional setback. It was personal humiliation on a global stage. The man trusted to guard the throne had been removed before he could even unpack fully. In football, time is a luxury. At Manchester United, it is almost non-existent. But tragedy in Moyes' career did not begin or end at Old Trafford. Years later, at Sunderland, he would face a different kind of torment. The 2016-2017 season became what he described as an unrelenting nightmare. Sunderland struggled from the outset. Injuries, inconsistency, and a fragile squad created a spiral that seemed impossible to escape. Week after week, hope faded. And for the first time in his managerial life, Moyes experienced relegation. For a man known as a stabiliser, a builder, a survivor, relegation was a deep wound. His reputation had once been built on keeping Everton competitive with limited resources. Now he was associated with decline. The drop from the Premier League was not just a statistic, it was symbolic. Critics whispered that the game had moved on from him, that his methods were outdated, that the modern era had no room for steady pragmatists. Yet football has a strange way of circling back. Moyes found redemption at West Ham United. It wasn't glamorous at first, it was survival work again. But slowly, he rebuilt, he restructured, he instilled belief. And then, in 2023, came a moment few predicted, West Ham lifting the UEFA Europa Conference League trophy. Silverware, European glory, tears on the touchline. It was not the Champions League, but it was proof that Moyes could still lead men to triumph. That victory, however, existed alongside heartbreak. Years earlier, he had suffered painful near misses, including the 2009 FA Cup final defeat to Chelsea while at Everton. A single goal separated glory from despair. In 2012, another semi-final exit against rivals Liverpool reopened old wounds. Football often remembers winners and forgets how close the losers came. Moyes' career has been defined by those narrow margins. As of 2026, back at Everton once more, he faces yet another chapter filled with uncertainty. The romanticism of returning to a former home quickly gives way to modern realities. Football has changed. Expectations have grown sharper. Social media amplifies every misstep. And when marquee loan signing Jack Grealish suffered a season-ending stress fracture in February 2026, the optimism around the project took a heavy blow. Injuries are cruel because they strip managers of plans they cannot control. But beyond the touchline, Moyes' story carries personal weight as well. In June 2025, during what should have been a celebratory period after receiving an OBE for services to football, he revealed that his mother-in-law had passed away. Grief and honour collided in the same breath. Public recognition of decades of work came alongside private sorrow. It was another reminder that behind every manager standing in a technical area is a man navigating life's unpredictability. There was also the 2017 incident involving BBC reporter Vicky Sparks. After a post-match interview, Moyes made a remark that he might get a slap, a comment widely condemned as inappropriate and threatening. The backlash was immediate. He received a $30,000 fine and issued a full apology. In that moment, frustration boiled over into words he later regretted. It was a lapse that reinforced how thin the line is between pressure and composure. Pressure has followed Moyes since his early days as a player. Long before the Premier League spotlight, he endured physical abuse at Cambridge United because of his Christian faith. He was, by his own admission, battered by a teammate who targeted him for his beliefs. Those early experiences hardened him. They shaped the quiet steel that defines his demeanour today. Faith became a private anchor in a profession built on public judgment. Even his relationship with Wayne Rooney carried its own dramatic twist. When Rooney alleged in his autobiography that Moyes had forced him out of Everton, Moyes responded not with anger in interviews, but with legal action. He sued for libel. The case was settled out of court, but the message was clear. Moyes would defend his integrity. In football, reputations are currency, and he was not willing to let his be rewritten. Throughout his career, Moyes has often been cast as a nearly man, the capable lieutenant who struggled when handed the crown, the steady builder overshadowed by more charismatic figures. But that narrative simplifies a complex journey because longevity in football management is rare. Survival itself is a mark of resilience, and Moyes has survived storms that would have swept others away entirely. He has spoken openly about the mental toll of modern management, the relentless scrutiny, the 24-hour news cycle dissecting every substitution, the sense that one bad month can erase 10 years of steady work. In 2026, he publicly criticised the unrealistic demands placed on managers, describing the job as more volatile than ever before. It was not bitterness, it was reflection. Football romanticises instant success, but Moyes represents something different. Persistence, the willingness to return after humiliation, the courage to rebuild reputation piece by piece, the humility to accept mistakes. His career is not a straight line upward. It is jagged, uneven, human. Perhaps that is why comparisons to Shakespeare feel fitting. There is ambition, downfall, exile, redemption, and reflection. There are villains in the media narrative, dramatic images like the Grim Reaper costume, and moments of triumph that feel almost poetic. But unlike tragic heroes who meet irreversible ends, Moyes continues to write new chapters. Back at Everton, he stands once again in a familiar dugout, older, more measured, fully aware of how fragile football power can be. He no longer chases validation the way he once might have. He understands that reputation can collapse overnight and rebuild slowly over years. He understands that loyalty in football is conditional, but he also understands that resilience is permanent. The young manager who once stepped into Ferguson's shadow may have been overwhelmed. The older Moyes carries scars, but also perspective. Experience has reshaped him. He has tasted ridicule and redemption. He has navigated boardroom politics, player power, and public outrage. And still, he remains. David Moyes' story is not one of flawless glory. It is one of endurance, of setbacks that threatened to define him, but did not finish him, of moments that could have broken his confidence permanently, but instead forced growth. In a sport obsessed with trophies and headlines, his career reminds us that character is built in the quiet aftermath of defeat. In the end, the so-called tragedies are chapters, not conclusions. Manchester United did not end him. Sunderland did not erase him. Public controversies did not silence him. Family grief did not weaken him. Each challenge reshaped the man on the touchline. And as football continues to evolve, David Moyes remains part of its story. Not as a flawless hero, but as something far more relatable, a survivor of the modern game. What makes Moyes' journey compelling is that he never reinvented himself into something he was not. He did not suddenly become a flamboyant tactician or a headline-chasing personality. He remained methodical, disciplined, structured. In an era of high-pressing trends and tactical revolutions, he trusted organisation, work rate, and collective responsibility. Critics called it outdated. Supporters called it reliable. But for Moyes, it was identity. And identity in football is often the only stable ground a manager truly owns. There is also a quiet dignity in the way he handles criticism. Now, earlier in his career, defeats seemed to visibly weigh on him, his expression tightening under the glare of cameras. Today, there is a calmer presence. He answers difficult questions with measured reflection rather than visible frustration. That emotional evolution speaks to years of surviving storms. He understands that outrage passes, headlines fade, and only the long view truly matters. Younger managers often burn brightly and disappear quickly, consumed by expectation. Moyes has endured across decades, across different clubs, across different eras of the Premier League. That endurance is not accidental. It is built on adaptability without surrendering core principles. He has adjusted systems, embraced sports, science, modernized training methods. But he has never compromised on discipline and unity. Those foundations have kept him relevant when others faded. And perhaps that is the final lesson of David Moyes' so-called tragedies. They were never purely endings. They were transitions. Painful, public, sometimes humiliating transitions, but transitions nonetheless. His story continues to unfold, shaped by setbacks, yet defined by perseverance. In a game that rarely forgives and never forgets, David Moyes remains standing, not untouched by failure, but strengthened by it.